I'm glad that you learned a lot from him. And there's also so much that we can learn from each other. For instance, one of the things that I think we need to start doing is that we need to start in our names. If you can see here, you see my picture, and then next to my name and next to my picture there is my name. For networking purposes, is that we then we rename our name, and we put whatever we want people to know us, or whatever that we're looking for. So if you are Dumiso Nkonzo and you run Ekasi Properties, then you put Dumiso Nkonzo Ekasi Properties, just like I've done now. So if you see there, from my side, it just shows Dumiso Nkonzo Ekasi. So if you are a property investor, then you just say the investor. If you are a developer, you say you are a developer. If you are an agent, because we've got all kinds of people here, then you say agent or architect or whatever, because the world has opened up. Architects now can work all over the country. You don't have to be in Gauteng to be able to assist people from Gauteng. So I think that's what we also need to start doing. Another thing that works very well is to have like, for instance, the background, what do they call it? The virtual background in my case that says Ekasi Properties, so that you guys can know that this is Ekasi Properties. Instead of having a picture, I will recognize you now, Shegazo-san. If, like, for instance, I'm just referring to him now, instead of having his picture there, if you want, you can change that picture and put something that you want to be known for, so that if people are sitting here and they are looking for an architect, and you are Sana and you're an architect, just write the architect. And then we can then connect on Facebook, and then we keep the movement going and be able to assist each other from then on. Sana?
Yeah, thanks, Brother Ndumi. So, yeah, to what you just said now, I'm still struggling to identify myself in terms of, I'm trying to do a lot of things at once. So a background that will speak to Ekasi Properties, for now it may be a bit confusing. But coming to the session, Saturday sessions, I think it is proper to thank you for the initiative, and also expanding and inviting everyone. We have tried to start this game of property, and we started without knowledge. But associating with people like you, I think it has opened my mind per se, not necessarily, I wouldn't speak for everybody, but for me, it has opened my mind. I think now I know what to do and how to do it. Yeah, we have started, but very small. But I think the knowledge that I've gained so far, it's very much. I appreciate it, because at this moment, I think I would not do many errors, because I was fortunate enough to meet people like you and the rest of the crew, and they shared their expertise. I think there was a session that you invited Vangile Magwagwa. That session, it has given me a camping site in the podcast that she's sharing. I think I've listened to a very good number of those sessions. They are, what I like about them is people that are in this property business, and they are sharing different experiences, how they started, and the experiences they got, good and bad. So it gives us enough time to learn from their mistakes and not commit the same mistakes as we start our journey as people that are starting this game. But I think, you have done a great job. We thank you for everything. Yeah, and thank for this morning again. because I was still about to send you a text, and then you read my mind on that one. Thank you very much, my brother. Keep it up. Sure.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thanks for the feedback. Now, you mentioned many things that I would want to talk about, but I will just talk on two things from what you said. The first one is the issue around starting up and not having knowledge, and that you are here. It amazes me that today so far it's only 15 people that are in this webinar. But in the group, Ekasi Properties group, we have more than 17,000 people. Now it amazes me that we only have 15. I don't know what is 15 out of 17,000 in terms of the percentages. But it shows that the people that are here is the people that are willing to learn, and they might want to do other things, but they're willing to learn. And this is a commitment of, I don't know, most of the time we charge 250. In fact, we charge 250 per series of 4 Saturdays, which is 62 rands a Saturday. If you are serious about learning, I'm not really sure if we can really consider that as being money. And it only takes about 1.5 hours or close to 2 hours every Saturday that you commit to your personal development. But yeah, people that are just not really interested in learning. Information is all available, but people are not interested. But also the things that another issue that I wanted to talk about is just in passing as well, is the around goals, that we need to start thinking about. We are attending these sessions today, but what is it that we want to get out of them? So when you attend, you must know, as the year is going to start, you must know what you want to get out of these sessions. And I would want to encourage everyone that comes here that by the end of next year, we should all have at least invested in at least one property. And in the online program that we have with that Nigel is running, he just joined us. He did say last week that you're not going to graduate if you're not having bought at least one property. So there should be a purpose and an intention behind you doing all of these things that we're doing. But just on the issue of Vangile, I'm glad that you are not talking about what Vangile came here to share, but you're talking about something that you picked out of Vangile coming to this session, which is the podcast. It's not what she was here. She was here about the financial traumas, but you're talking about the podcast. And this is what I say to people, that when you're meeting other people, don't just meet for, don't limit your scope into what that person is talking about, but look at other things that you are here. For instance, we have a mega personality in the property industry for 5 weeks. If you're not getting anything else, or if you have some kind of knowledge from what Nigel is sharing in these Saturdays, take something out of something else that he's doing or he's talking about. Go out there and look up and try to find out who is Nigel and what does he do, and see whether you can benefit out of you having met him through this platform, like you did, Osana, in Vangile. Maybe let me just quickly give it to Boye before we begin with Nigel. Boye?
Hi. Mine was more on assessment in terms of, how do we have a session on a Saturday, and how do we assess, and find out how the needs of members, or expectations were met. But I don't want to prolong it, because now Nigel has met. It's something that we can think of for next year. When you have any program, you always have an M&E component on it in terms of monitoring and evaluating the effectiveness of what you are doing. So let me just pause there for now. I can expand on it later. And also because I also had a point on, you know, what are member expectations, because that also feeds into,
Yes.
you know, monitoring what they are receiving. Let's end there, and I wouldn't necessarily expect feedback for now because it's food for thought. And yeah, I would like to give Nigel his time. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Busi, and thanks for the point that you raised. And maybe me and you must chat, even if it's outside the session, and we see how we can take this forward. And yeah, thanks for being considerate as well to Nigel's time. And I see my very good friend Miranda Mtolo is here, and Mizo, welcome. Nigel?
Hey everyone.
Hi Nigel, good morning. You managed to connect.
Yeah, no, I've been having problems this morning, unfortunately. Coming off my golf day this week, I didn't have a chance to prepare. So I rushed in here this morning after flying back last night. And yeah, I didn't really realize how much problems I'm going to have with my laptop. It's actually going in for a hard drive replacement today. So when I'm done here, that's where I'm going.
It had too much fun in the golf course. Eh?
Yeah, I had too much fun. Yeah.
Thank you, Nigel. I think we can start so that everyone else is on time. But yeah, please take as much time as you need in your presentation, because although we need to be considerate with time, I think that the two topics that you have decided to share with us this Saturday are very critical for property investors. So let's take as much time to present it. But again, ladies and gentlemen, let's ask as many questions as we can in this session. If you forget and you happen to remember some questions next week, please jot them down. Nigel, I'm sure he won't mind you coming back next week and asking them him these questions, because these two sessions, the three topics that Nigel is going to talk about today, they're critically important. You can't go without them as a property investor. Okay, Nigel, thank you again for sharing the information with us. You may go ahead.
All right, thanks, Ndumiso, and thank you to the ECASI membership for allowing me some time to just come and chat. Maybe aware, if you follow me on Twitter or on Facebook or LinkedIn or any of the social media platforms, you'll see I'm completely passionate about property. I speak about nothing else. I don't even share any of my personal information on Facebook. I only talk property wherever I go, whatever I do, any of the media platforms, property is all I talk about. And property education, more especially, to bring as many people as possible onto a platform where they can invest in property. So I'm not going to speak much about myself, because you guys, most of you have heard me already. If any of you haven't heard me yet, go and check out my Facebook page, check out EDPF Property, check out the Academy. And Ndumiso will share all of my links and websites and so on with you, that you can check us out. I'm going to jump into our third session now, because we don't have much time, unfortunately. So let's quickly go there. All right. Let me kill my video feed so that we can have enough juice here from my side in order to share. Okay, so we've gone through some principles of financial freedom. We've spoken about successful property investing. And today we're going to share something about strategy, area, property, and finance. Hopefully we'll get into income versus cash flow as well. But I doubt it. I think we're going to probably only have enough time to talk strategy, area, property, and finance. And then next week, we'll talk income versus cash flow, financial metrics, and hopefully deal analytics. And then the last week, we'll talk protecting your wealth, property as a business, and taking action. So let's jump right into it. All right, if my will work with me here. Okay, Dumiso, can you?
Yes, we can.
Okay, excellent. All right, and you want to become a property investor. What I mean by that is, what is it that you are going to do with regard to investment? What type of investment are you going to make? Some people will use more than one strategy. Other people will focus on just one single strategy and for the rest of their life, focus just on that one thing. There are many different strategies that you can use. I'm only going to highlight the top, what's this, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. 10 of the top strategies used by most property investors. So when you look at these strategies, before you decide which strategy you're going to go into, you first need to decide what ultimately your goals are. We spoke about goals and so on last week and the week before. And really you need to decide on a strategy based on your goals. So let's say, for example, my goal is to make a quick buck. I want to earn some quick money over the next year or two. And I want to then use that money to go on a holiday. Then you cannot go into a long-term buy-to-let strategy, for example, because that is, as I've just said, long-term. If you want to do something like that and you want to earn quick money, which I don't advise in the property sector anyway, but let's say that's your strategy. You want to earn some quick money so you can go on a holiday to Dubai or to the UK or to America or wherever, then there are really two strategies that you will use. The one is sourcing and the other one is flipping. Those are the easiest ones to use if you're looking at a short-term strategy where your goal is to make some quick money for a certain purpose. Okay, so let's talk about these two. What is sourcing? Sourcing is when somebody doesn't actually buy property, but they find deals for other people. Now, this is something you've got to be very careful of, because it could be the receiver of revenue could look at you and say, hold on a minute, you are acting like a real estate broker. You are finding deals and you are selling it to other people. The Estate Agencies Affairs Board, based on the new Property Practitioners Bill, could look at you and go, hold on a minute, you're a real estate agent. So you need to register and have a Fidelity Fund certificate. Now, if you do not have a Fidelity Fund certificate, you cannot trade as a property practitioner. And property practitioners has a broad spectrum in the new Property Practitioners Bill. It's not just real estate agents. It's anybody that has any dealing in the sale of a property. So that includes developers and many, many other types of people who are dealing in sourcing and so on. So you need to be very careful how you structure your sourcing deal. And you may need to get an attorney involved to help you structure so that you do not fall foul of the law with regard to acting as if you are an estate agent. So you got to be very careful there. But let me explain what sourcing is. Sourcing basically is, I find a deal. Let's say I'm looking at deals in Boksburg. So I find a deal in Boksburg and I put the structure together. I find the seller and I find a buyer. So I then say to the seller, I want to buy a property and then on-sell it to a buyer. But I'm not going to directly buy it from you. I'm going to get somebody else to buy it from you. So you then package the deal. You will structure the deal in terms of whether you take a stake in the business or not, whether you're just going to take a commission off it or not. And that's the part where you need to be very careful, where if you decide you're going to take a commission, because any commission can only be paid out by the attorneys if you're an estate agent. So you need to be very careful where that is concerned. If you, however, take a stake in the business where the buyer buys the property and you take, say, a 5 or a 7.5 or 10% stake in that deal, then that is okay. And you're not then considered to be a broker, because you are not taking a commission, you are actually forming part of the deal. However, that may not work for you if your strategy is a short-term strategy. If your goal is to take the money out quickly, you may have to wait a little bit longer because the buyer may not want to buy you out of your small percentage that you own. So again, you need to be very, very careful how you structure that deal. And I would recommend that you talk to your attorney if you're going to go into the sourcing, into that type of business. But that's what you can do. You find the deal, you find a buyer, and then you either take a stake in that deal or you take a commission for finding the buyer. All right. The packaging is really where you make your money, because any broker, any real estate agent can have a seller find a buyer by advertising on Property 24 and then sell the property and get their commission. In that case, obviously, they'll get anywhere from 1% up to 7.5% maybe in terms of the commission that they would have earned. When you become a sourcing agent, you can take a lot more than 7.5% because it's in the structuring of the deal where you really make your money. So you will find, as the guys normally talk, they say, find the worst house on the best street. You find that worst house on the best street, and you then package it with a development opportunity where you get all the guys to come, you get your quantity surveyor in to come and quote you on what your development is going to cost. You get your architects to draw some plans, and your rezoning needs to be done, what that's going to cost, the timeframes, and doing a full bankable feasibility for the buyer. Once all of that is concluded, you can then charge a much higher fee because you've put a whole package together for the buyer, an investment package that normally a real estate agent would not do. A real estate agent would just sell a property as is. You are going to take that property and convert it into a development opportunity and then on-sell it to that buyer, and in so doing, create additional value, and it's in that value that you can get more than 7.5%. So you can charge as much as you want based on the value of that work that you have done. So effectively what's happening here is that the buyer is paying you for what they call sweat equity. Remember that term. It's an important term when you are dealing in sourcing and flipping and other deals where you don't have money. So when you get involved in sourcing, in flipping, in buy-to-lets, multi-lets, student accommodation, whatever you're getting involved in, if you do not have money and you need to raise the capital in order to purchase the property, then what the value that you bring to the party is your sweat equity. By that we mean the time, the effort, and the sweat that you have put in order to make that deal better than what it is right now. So you're buying the worst property on the best street. You then put the package together, the development package together, that's going to make that deal a lot sweeter and is going to create and add more value to that property opportunity for an investor. And that's why you get paid, because you're the one that's putting in all the hard work. You're putting in all the graft, all the sweat, all the tears, and sometimes even blood. You're the one who's going to put all the work in, and all the financier is doing is putting money in. They don't have to think about anything other than whether they believe you when you bring them the bankable feasibility study. So that's all about sourcing. Sourcing is, like I said, you find a deal, you package it, you create value in it, and then you take it to a buyer and you on-sell it. Either, like I said, in a direct commission structure where you get paid for your sweat equity, or where you take a stake in the business and you then, through your sweat equity, you get a percentage of that. So that is sourcing. The next strategy is flipping. In this industry, you will find there's a lot of guys who try to do flipping deals, where it's similar to sourcing, except that you're actually putting in the physical work. So here, you will take a property, again, let's say it's the worst house on the best street, but you've seen an opportunity in converting that house, let's say, into a multi-let or a student accommodation opportunity. You then buy the property, you put in some effort by creating a feasibility study, just like we've discussed now, see whether that feasibility, whether that opportunity is feasible, and then you actually put in the money in order to fix up the property, in order to convert it to what it is currently, maybe a single residential, into a multi-let where you can put in 10 people, or student accommodation where you can put in 20 people, which then obviously adds huge value, because instead of just having one family in the property, you now have 10 or 20 people in the property. But you're the one who's actually doing the work. You're doing the painting, you're doing the plumbing, you're doing the bricking of the walls, you're doing the additional adding onto the property of maybe another cottage, or you're building up, or you're changing the structure of the property in whatever way. You're the one who's actually doing that. And then when you are done, you on-sell it to somebody else who's interested in that type of investment. So now you've taken a property which is a single residential, as an example, into a 10-room multi-let, and then on-sell it to an investor who's looking for multi-lets, whose strategy is a multi-let strategy, where you have 10 different people, not family members, living in a property and paying you much more rent than one family would have if you had left the house as it is. You could also buy a property that is derelict, fix it up a little bit, and still only have one family live in it. But because you've added value by putting in some paint, changing the basins, changing the bath, changing the shower heads, changing the kitchen, putting in some tiling, and then you've added that additional value, but it's still only a family home. Then you either sell it onto a family who's looking to live in that area in a much nicer house, or you sell it to an investor who wants to rent out the property to a family. So those are the kinds of things that you can do when you get into flipping. Now, as I said before, I'm not really into sourcing and flipping because I'm into long-term strategies. But if you want to do something and your goal is to make money quickly, then those are the two kinds of strategies that you can use in order to make money quickly. Now, here's my problem with sourcing and flipping. If you cannot find a buyer, then you are stuck with that property. Not necessarily sourcing so much, because with sourcing, you don't actually buy the property. Flipping, however, you're actually buying the property. Unless, of course, you are using the strategy of using other people's money, by using other people's money, the strategy of using the seller's money. So you could do the deal by getting the seller to put all the money in. You do not buy the property from them. You then on-sell it to a new buyer after the work has been done, but the sellers actually put the money in. Then your risk is very minimal. Your only risk then is that the seller sells the property and doesn't pay you your commission. Or the EAAB recognizes what you're doing, and then the attorney doesn't pay you your commission because you are not a registered fund, you do not hold a Fidelity Fund certificate. Those are the kinds of dangers that you have in these types of strategies. But you don't necessarily have to put in the money. In most cases, when it's a flip deal, the seller won't fund the deal. They will want you to put in the money to at least fix up the property. And again, here's the danger in that. The seller could turn around and say, well, you haven't sold the property, but you've put money into fixing the property up, and then he on-sells it and never pays you for the work that you put in, and you've lost a couple of tens of thousands, even maybe 100,000 or so of money that you put into the property. And that's the dangers of sourcing and flipping. The biggest danger is that you overprice and that you can't sell the property, or you sell it for less than what you've put in and you've then lost money. Now, I've burnt my fingers many times like this. Over the years, I've easily lost about 5, maybe 6 million rand in trying to do deals like that, where I've bought a property, I fixed it up, I've even lived in it because I couldn't sell it, because I've overpriced it for the market. I've lost a couple of 100,000 here and there. One property in particular in Sundowner in Johannesburg. I lived in that for about a year and a half. And when I was done and I tried to sell it, I lost 900,000 Rand on that one deal. So it is very easy to lose money on a sourcing or flipping deal. I would not recommend those two. But if your strategy is short-term and you want to make money quickly, then those are the only two real ways that you can do it. Okay, now let's get into the things that I like, the long-term strategies. The first one is buy to let. Now this is simple. You buy a property and you let it out. Very, very simple. The only difficulty is where do you get the money? And we'll talk about where you raise money, how you can raise money. And I've got videos on my website that you can watch. There's about, I think about 20 videos on my 50-day challenge that you can watch. And that's free of charge. You don't have to be on my program. You don't have to be on the course. You can just watch that free of charge on how to raise money if you do not, how to buy property if you do not have your own money and using other people's money. That's my favorite drug of choice, opium, other people's money. So if you want to buy a property and you want to let it out and you don't have money, go look at my videos. There are many ways to find money to buy a property to let. Now, like I said, this is the easiest of all strategies. You buy a property, you don't do anything to it, you just let it out. Now, obviously, you need to be careful here and make sure that whatever you buy below market value, because most likely, if you don't buy it below market value, you are going to end up renting it out at a lower price than the expenses you have and that the bond is that you have to pay. And most likely, you're going to have to then put in some cash, and that's what they call you being cash flow negative. In any property deal, you want to money into a deal every single day. You find a deal that is so sweet, so nice, that property is so nice, that you want that property regardless of the fact that you are going to put in that extra bit of cash every month, because you know that the value increment every year, that the increase in the value of that property over the years, the history of it shows you that the increase in the value is where you're really going to make your money long term, not in the short term cash flow. Now, I like both. I like to know that short term, I'm going to make money with my cash flow because my cash flow is positive, where my expenses and my bond is lower than my income. And on top of that, I like to have a property that's in an area that traditionally will grow in value. So that every year, if I've bought a property, that my property grows at least beyond inflation. You do not want to buy property that is traditionally grows below inflation, because what's actually happening is in the background there, you don't see it because you're thinking that you've bought a property for $1 million and it grows by 4%, but actually inflation's grown by 6%. You've then lost 2% in value. So you must always make sure that the kind of growth in the area from a capital perspective of your property is higher traditionally, and the history of that property, that the value always increases by more than inflation. So that that extra value that you've created at the end of the day, when you eventually sell that property, that you sell it for a lot more in real terms than what you bought it for. And by real terms, I mean that the value of the money in 10 years' time is a lot more than the value of the money you buy today. And there's a whole course that you can do on the value of money and how money devalues over a period of time every year because of inflation. So as an example, if you buy Kentucky today, if you buy one piece of Kentucky, you will pay, I think it's about what, 15 Rand or 17 Rand for a piece of Kentucky. If you had bought that Kentucky 10 years ago, you would have probably paid 50 cents or maybe a Rand. Now that's what we mean by the reduction in value of money over time. Today, money is worth, 15 Rand is worth, or let's say 10 years ago, 1 Rand was worth one piece of Kentucky. Today, one piece of Kentucky is worth 15 or 17 Rand. So therefore, that same Kentucky you can't buy for R1 anymore. So your money has devalued by 15 times, because for 10 years ago, you could buy it for R1. Today, you have to buy it for 15 Rand. So your money devalues because of inflation. If your property increases more than inflation, then you're just having a value increase that is not really monetary. It is more psychological. You bought it for $1 million, it's now worth 2 million, but that 2 million is worth less than the million it was 10 years ago. If you want to understand a little bit more about that, there is a course that I do for, it takes about 3 or 4 hours to explain the value of money and value accretion and all of that sort of thing. In any event, so I always look for property where the property value increases more than inflation. And that buy-to-let strategy that I use is to say, number one, is my cash flow positive? Am I getting cash out of the deal every month? And is my property going to increase in value more than inflation? Those are the two key areas that I look at when I do any, in fact, any investment strategy, whether it be buy-to-let or multi-let. So a buy-to-let strategy, very simple. You buy a property, you let it out. Sometimes you have to put some money in because the property isn't in a lettable condition. So maybe the basins are broken, maybe the bedroom has been destroyed by the previous tenants or the owner. He just didn't care about his property. The plumbing is a bit shoddy. So you have to maybe put a little bit of money in to make it look better so that it can become rentable or lettable. So you put some money in, as long as at the end of the day, the money that you've put in purchasing the property, the legal costs that you have to put in, the transfer duty, if there is any, and the fixing up of the property, if all of those costs collectively is less than the market value, you've already made money because you've bought less than market value, you fixed it up, all of that, and it's still below market value. So if you decide to sell tomorrow, then at least you'll be able to make a bit of a margin. If anything goes wrong and you can't afford the property anymore because your tenant has left and you can't find a new tenant and you now have to all of a sudden put money in order to manage the bond and all the expenses, then you at least have the ability to sell the property and still make a profit because you've bought for under the market value. Okay, so that's buy-to-let. Very simple. You purchase, you rent it out. Number two is multi-let. Now this is similar, except that in this case, you are buying, you are changing the strategy a little bit by not just renting out to one family. You're now going to build a couple of rooms onto the place. You're going to fix up the thing a little bit, and then you let it out to more than one person or more than one family. Hence the term multi-let. When you're renting out to more than one person, the danger here is that the people don't get along, that one person steals from others, that you can have all sorts of personality clashes within the community. I personally don't like the multi-let strategy. I love the buy-to-let strategy, not the multi-let strategy. But multi-let, you can make a lot more money than the buy-to-let strategy. And always, you must always remember this. The more risk you take, the more money you can make. And that's just the nature of risk. The less risk you take, the less money you will make. It is just the nature of risk. Now, multi-let for me is a bit too risky. But for other people, they like the challenge. And if you can look after that property and you can manage your people properly, then multi-let is a really good strategy because you can make more money off the same property. So yeah, if you want to go into a multi-let strategy, you need to be prepared to spend some money. So you buy the property with a view to changing the structure in order to create a scenario where you can rent out the place to more than one family. Or you buy a big property where there's already 5 bedrooms, for example, and you put 2 beds in each bedroom, and now all of a sudden, instead of one family, you've got 10 people living there. If it's a big house of 5 bedrooms, for example. I purchased a property in that same property in Sundowner. If I wanted to make that a multi-let, I easily could have, because it was a 7-bedroom, 7-bathroom, with 2 massive lounges, a cottage in the back, an entertainment area in the back. There was a swimming pool, there was a LARPer, and it was 1,400 square meters. I could actually have built on even more. So I could have taken that and turned it into a multi-let strategy. But because I had moved back to Cape Town at the time, I didn't want to stress myself out about managing a property in a city that I didn't live. Because if I was gonna rent it out to more than one family, and there was going to be many people in the property, I need to be there physically in order to look after those people, to make sure that that they're not abusing one another, they're not stealing from one another, that things are not, that one person isn't creating a bad environment for everybody else, and then all your other tenants leave because of one person. So that's the thing about multi-lets. You need to be sure that you look after your tenants. Okay, student accommodation is very similar to multi-let, except that you're only looking after students. So student accommodation, can you guys please mute your mics, because there constantly is a disturbance here. Thank you. With student accommodation, obviously, you're going to have a lot of people in a property, but they're all students. Generally, people don't like to live with students because they're rowdy. They're noisy. They do all sorts of crazy things at night. They stay up until after midnight. And generally, people don't want to live with students in that kind of environment. So when you create a student accommodation, make sure that there are only students living in your property so that they don't disturb your other tenants. If you are going to do a multi-let with student accommodation, then make sure that the two are separated, because you don't want the one to disturb the other. With student accommodation, you need to obviously be registered with the university as a student accommodation provider. You can do private student accommodation without being registered. That's all good and well, but it is better to be registered with the student, with the university, because if you are, then they will also send you business. Then you don't have to, in the main, you don't have to find students to come and stay with you. Student accommodation, you can take everything that I said about multi-lets and you can sort of transcribe it into the student accommodation opportunity, but that it's really just about renting space to students. One of the big factors with student accommodation, however, is you cannot be very far from the university. The university, in normal cases, university doesn't allow you to be more than 7 kilometers away from the campus. So if you are more than 7 kilometers away from the campus, normally what they would expect of you is that you actually provide transport for the students. If you can do that, great for you. You can live in a nice community then, and then provide transport for your students. But obviously that's going to be a big cost to you as the landlord. You can, however, because of that, you can charge a bit more. But I would recommend that you be within the 7 kilometer radius so that it's easier for the students to get to varsity. Now, normally they would also recommend, or they would actually, in fact, insist that if you are within that 7 kilometer radius, that they are on the transport routes, because they don't want the students to be walking 7 kilometers to university. So you have to be on the transport route so that it's easy for the students to get to varsity. Okay, just give me a second. Let me take a sip of my water. Okay, so that's student accommodation. The next one is commercial. Commercial is really, there are three commercial opportunities. The one is office, then there's retail and industrial. Now, these are obviously a lot more expensive than residential. I would not recommend anybody to go into commercial until you've cut your teeth on residential. It's much easier to get into residential than it is into commercial, mainly because of cost. Now, granted, with commercial, you have to deal with less issues because you're now dealing with businesses, but it is a lot more expensive to invest in commercial property, whether it be office, whether it be retail, shopping centers, so on, or whether it be industrial. I love industrial because it is mostly a single tenant that is a factory, and they generally just look after the place themselves. So it's the easiest way to invest when it comes to commercial, but again, it's expensive. You need to have a lot of money by either of your own, or your investors must be able to bring the money, and the banks must believe and trust you in order for them to fund you. Now, you only get to that stage when you've cut your teeth in things like residential. If you've built a great portfolio, the banks and your investors will have trusted you over a period of time, and only then would you say, let's get into the commercial sphere. I would not recommend office at the moment. Office is obviously, because of COVID, most people are not going to work. They're working from home. At this point in time, office space is very difficult to find tenants, if not impossible. Even so with retail as well. With retail, if you're going to build a new shopping center now, you need to first find your tenants before you go and build a retail shopping center. Because and even under normal circumstances, forget COVID, under normal circumstances, if you're going to ask the bank for money to buy or build a retail shopping center or commercial office center or even an industrial center, the bank or your investors will want to see your tenants. They will want to know that there are big clients that will be able to pay the rent. Because if the rent isn't paid, it's not like a rent, like a student accommodation or any kind of residential, where if one person doesn't pay, you can still take that money out of your pocket and cover that cost. With commercial, if a big tenant doesn't pay, there's a lot of money that you got to come up with in order to cover the bond and the repayments to your investors. So you need to gain a lot of experience before you go into commercial. Okay, the next one is developments. If you decide you want to become a developer, you've got to learn a hell of a lot of things in order to become a developer. You got to learn the strategy of how to take a piece of land and convert it into something that is lettable. Either whether that is one single house, or whether it's a block of apartments, whether it is student accommodation, whether it is commercial office, retail, industrial, whatever you decide to do within the development space, you need to be sure that you have that experience, the knowledge, the understanding of those developments. Then you need to build a very strong team around yourself. You need to have an architect, you need to have a quantity surveyor, a land surveyor, a person that will deal with the transfers, a transferring attorney. There's a whole host of other people that you need in terms of developments. There are lots of development courses that you can do. In the EDPF course, we also do developments. There's EPIC. There's a really great course that EPIC does that you can do. And then there's also courses with SAPN and others that you can do if you want to become a developer. But I would not recommend that you start any development until you've not only learned how, so you've got the education. Number two, gained experience in investments. And number three, actually been part of developments where a big developer or a experienced developer, at least, that you've shadowed an experienced developer. Go and find a developer and offer your services for free. Go and work for them for free and learn how the development process works. Because if you don't learn how the development process works, you are going to make very, very expensive mistakes. One very, very classic mistake that gets made by a lot of new developers and even experienced developers is occupational health and safety, for example. Now, the Act, the Occupational Health and Safety Act, stipulates everything you need to do to keep the people on site safe. That's what occupational health and safety is all about, is to keep the people on site safe, whether it be from an asbestos perspective, where there is asbestos on the site and how to get rid of the asbestos, wearing hazmat suits and all that sort of thing, to somebody who is on a ladder that is more than 2 meters high. When you get onto a ladder that is more than 2 meters high, you have to have a harness that is attached to something that if you fall off the ladder, that you then get caught by the harness. To where you're building a skyscraper and people are standing on top of the skyscraper and fall off, you can imagine what's going to happen. There'll just be a pile of mush at the bottom there. So you need to have all of your occupational health and safety systems in place in order to keep the people on your site safe. Now, if the worst case scenario, you build something and somebody falls and you did not put all your occupational health and safety protocols in place, and somebody falls off your building and dies, you can, worst case scenario, go to prison because of that death. And you did not put the correct occupational health and safety protocols in place. Best case scenario, somebody gets hurt and you get sued and you lose all your money because you did not put all the occupational health and safety systems in place. It is very, very important that you have your occupational health and safety systems in place when you become a developer. Now, if you do not know that and you do not have an occupational health and safety consultant, a fire consultant, and all these other consultants that you need on the development, and something goes wrong, the insurance will not pay out. Let me say that again. The insurance will not pay out. Now, if somebody has gotten hurt and they sue you for 5 million and the court awards the case, the insurance doesn't pay out, you personally will be held liable for that 5 million rand. You need to be very, very careful when you're a developer. Make sure you have the right people around you. And I'm scaring you deliberately because I do not want you to get involved in developments until you've gained the experience. Go and find somebody that you can work with, learn from them, understand the ways of, how to do the development, learn as much as you can. And in a couple of years' time, after you've gained enough experience, then start development projects. Okay, then there are back-to-back deals. What I mean by back-to-back deals is basically you do a deal, you buy, and then you sell immediately without even paying for the deal. So this is a strategy that a lot of people use in terms of trying to buy a property and make some money. It's almost like flipping a deal. You can even call it sourcing sometimes. You buy a property and you immediately on-sell it to somebody. And how this normally works is before you finalize the deal and you buy the property, you first find a buyer. But you secure the property by putting in an offer to purchase. So you put in your offer to purchase. So now you've secured the deal. And then you find a buyer at a higher price. And then the attorney then takes the transfer to you and then immediately to the new buyer. And you take your profit from the one purchase from you purchasing to you selling. Now, this is a bit of a nuanced type of investment strategy. And you need to be very careful how you structure it. Again, talk to your attorney, talk to your tax consultant because it has huge tax implications, and talk to your estate agent because your estate agent, hopefully, if they are worth their salt, will know how to do the deal without you having to pay double transfer duties and all those kinds of things. You can do a deal like this where you don't have to pay double transfer duties. I'm currently doing a deal where we've purchased 76 properties. Well, it's one property with 76 apartments in it. They're all sectional title. We're buying them for about 270,000 each, and we're on-selling them for 300,000 each. We're making about a 12 or 13% margin, but it's a back-to-back deal. How we've structured it is that we've signed an overall deal with the seller, but we are then allowing him to on-sell each property individually, each apartment individually, directly to the buyer, so that it's not from him to us, where we then pay not transfer duty but legal costs, and then from us to the end buyer we have to pay again legal costs. We're only paying one legal cost because the agreement is then between the original seller and the final end buyer. But we've structured an overall deal where the profit of about 12% comes to us. So then I've used one of the financing structures by using other people's money, using the seller's money, because I have not actually paid the seller for anything. I bought the property from him on the basis that we now on-sell to these 76 other buyers, and they will each take transfer directly from the seller. So I've used multiple strategies there in order to do this deal. We are currently finalizing that deal. Due diligence is complete, and we are within the next 3 to 4 weeks going to start transferring the properties to the end buyers. So that is a back-to-back. A lease option is where you are leasing a property, and a lot of guys like Robin Booth, for example, he likes to use the lease option, where he rents a property from somebody and you then rent out to somebody else using, say, Airbnb, for example. So he's Robin as a classic example, and he doesn't mind me using his name because we are very close. So he buys or rents property from somebody with the view and the understanding, and that's important. You need to have the understanding of the owner of the property. So you're never going to take ownership. So you need to have the understanding of the owner and the approval and the permission of the owner in order to rent it out to somebody else. You're never going to stay in the property. You're renting it from them in order to rent it out to somebody else. So there are lots of different ways you can do this. You can rent it from somebody and then use it as student accommodation. But you look after the property. You then pay the landlord a fixed amount, and whatever you then bring in, whether it be through student accommodation, Airbnb, or whatever other method you use to rent, you then make a profit on what you rent out to those people versus what you are paying to the landlord. Now, the risk here is that you don't get anybody in the Airbnb. So now through COVID, for example, nobody's coming into South Africa. So you are not able to rent out the property through Airbnb. So now your property is standing empty, but you still have to pay the landlord. So that's the risky part of this strategy, is that when you are renting, you've got to pay the landlord. But if you are not renting it out to anybody else, you're making no money.